The chill in the air that evening wasn't the kind that merely seeps through your clothes. It was the sort that creeps into your very soul, whispering of secrets hidden in the dark corners of an otherwise festive room. My name is Evelyn, and my heart knew the winding paths of forbidden love all too well, even as the world watched, oblivious, thinking they understood the meaning behind my smiles and sighs. My story, shrouded in the shadows of deception, begins on a night when the stars themselves seemed to hold their breath. Our Victorian home, perched precariously on the cliffs overlooking the sea, was alive with the soft murmur of well-wishers gathered to celebrate my brother-in-law Henry's latest academic triumph. My husband, Michael, and I had weathered the storms of a nearly lifelong union, recently marred by silence and distance, not out of malice, but out of a quiet resignation to unfulfilled dreams. Michael had found solace in the arms of a younger woman named Clara, whose laughter echoed the youth I once possessed. Among the guests was Richard, my father-in-law, whose rugged charm and silver hair commanded more admiration than the moon commanding the tides. He was a fortress of a man, strong and imposing, yet within him dwelled a gentleness that often went unnoticed by all but those who cared to look closely. Our bond had deepened over the years, not out of necessity, but from a shared understanding of being the overlooked ones in a family portrait painted with broad strokes of expectation. As I navigated through clusters of guests, Richard caught my eye from across the room. His gaze was sharp and penetrating, seeming to slice through the facade of gaiety that I wore like a second skin. He approached, his footsteps sure and silent on the soft carpet, a glass of amber liquid in his hand extended towards me like an olive branch. "Evelyn, you seem miles away tonight. Is everything all right?" His voice was a mix of concern and unspoken thoughts, hanging in the air between us. I accepted the drink, our fingers brushing briefly, sending a shiver down my spine that had nothing to do with the cool night air. "Just tired, I suppose," I murmured, my eyes darting away to hide the storm within. Michael's absence was a silent scream in my head, his ghost lingering between the lines of every casual conversation I endured. Richard's next words were cloaked in a soft gravity. "He's missing his own brother's farewell." "That doesn't seem like him." I forced a smile. "Perhaps he's feeling the weight of the world on his shoulders tonight." Richard's eyes narrowed slightly, a silent acknowledgement of the unspoken truth between us. He knew, as did I, that Michael was likely somewhere drowning the remnants of our marriage in the neon lights of the city with Clara. "Let's find somewhere quieter to talk," Richard suggested, his hand lightly touching my back as he guided me away from the crowd and into his study. The room was a sanctuary of oak and leather, with books lining the walls like sentinels of a bygone era. The faint scent of tobacco and pine lingered in the air. It was here, in this haven of quietude, where the world seemed to pause, holding its breath as if waiting for the inevitable. Richard closed the door with a soft click, the sound marking the threshold between public facade and private truths. "You don't have to bear this burden alone," he said, his voice a soothing balm to the chaos of my thoughts. My heart was a wild thing within my chest, pounding against the confines I had built around it. His proximity was a heat I felt with every inch of my skin, his presence both a danger and a salve. "Why do you care so much?" I whispered, not sure if I was asking him or myself. He paused, his gaze intense. "Because, Evelyn, sometimes what we need isn't what we're bound to by law or blood, but what we find in the courage to reach for what's been in front of us all along." The moment stretched, taut like a string waiting to snap, as he stepped closer. His hands framed my face, his touch a whisper against my skin. "May I?" he asked, his breath mingling with mine, the question hanging in the air. I nodded, unable to speak, my body answering for me as I leaned into his embrace. His lips met mine, the world tilting on its axis, the kiss a storm of everything unsaid, every moment unspent. As the kiss deepened, I was lost to the sensation, my hands finding his hair, pulling him closer, as if I could somehow meld into him and hide from the truths we were writing with every touch. Richard's hands were firm on my back, his touch setting fire to the dry tinder of my restraint. We broke apart, breathless, the reality of our actions crashing down like waves against the cliffs below. "What are we doing?" I gasped, the gravity of our betrayal, not just to Michael, but to the family that had embraced me as their own, enveloping me like a cold fog. Richard's eyes, dark with the same tumultuous desire and fear, met mine. "Something that should have happened a long time ago," he confessed, his voice rough like the sea winds. But the night was far from over, and the shadows we thought we controlled were only just beginning to stretch their long fingers towards us. It was then that I heard the front door open, the sound distant yet dreadfully clear. Michael had returned, and with him, the fragile facade we maintained threatened to shatter, leaving nothing but the jagged truth exposed. The sound of the front door closing was a soft but ominous echo through the corridors of our old home, a stark reminder of the reality we were skirting. Richard and I froze, the heat of our transgression giving way to a cold wave of dread. He stepped back, the distance between us growing as if to put miles instead of mere feet between our indiscretion. "Michael's back," I whispered, his name tasting like betrayal on my tongue. Richard's jaw tightened, his eyes scanning the door as if he could discern the consequences that lay beyond it through the solid oak. "Let's go back." "Act naturally," Richard advised, his voice steady, but his hands betraying a slight tremor as he adjusted his shirt. I nodded, smoothing down my dress, a futile attempt to erase the evidence of our intimacy. We left the sanctuary of the study, each step towards the living room heavy with the weight of our shared guilt. As we entered the room, the air felt charged, the leftover joy of the celebration now tinged with the static of tension. Michael was there, a storm cloud in human form, his eyes scanning the room until they found me. The look he gave me was piercing, searching for something amiss. Beside him, Clara, oblivious to the undercurrents, chatted animatedly with a cousin. Richard and I mingled, our attempts at normalcy as transparent as glass to anyone who cared to look closely. Every laugh felt hollow, every glance loaded with unspoken words. It wasn't long before Michael approached, his stride deliberate, his demeanor a facade of calm. "Evelyn, a word," he said, his voice low, a barely contained fury simmering beneath the surface. I followed him to the edge of the room, away from the curious ears of our family. "What's going on with you and Richard?" Michael demanded, his eyes narrowing. The question hung in the air, thick and accusatory. My heart pounded, the deceit heavy on my shoulders. "Nothing, Michael. We were just talking," I replied, my voice steady despite the chaos swirling inside me. "Don't lie to me. I saw the way you two were together. It's not just tonight, is it?" His accusation sliced through the last thread of my composure. "Michael, you're not exactly innocent in this. What about Clara? How long did you think you could keep that from me?" I countered, the words spilling out, fueled by a mix of defense and accusation. He paused, his anger faltering under the weight of his own hypocrisy. "That's different," he muttered, but the conviction was gone from his voice. "Is it? Because from where I'm standing, it seems we're both seeking something we lost a long time ago," I said, the sadness in my words more profound than the anger. Michael looked away, the lines of his face softening slightly. "Maybe you're right. Maybe we're both just lost," he conceded, his voice a whisper of defeat. The room seemed to close in on us, the walls bearing witness to the crumbling facade of our marriage. We stood in silence, the distance between us filled with years of unsaid words and unmet needs. It was then that Richard approached, his expression one of concern. "Is everything all right here?" he asked, his voice a calm in the storm. Michael glanced between us, understanding dawning slowly. "I think it's time we all had an honest conversation about where we go from here," he said, his voice steady but resigned. The three of us sat down, the conversation that followed difficult, filled with admissions of failures and acknowledgments of the hurts we had inflicted upon each other. It was not just a discussion about the future of a marriage, but about the paths we each needed to take towards healing, whether together or apart. As dawn broke, painting the sky with strokes of pink and orange, a decision was made. It was time to let go, not out of anger or spite, but from a place of mutual respect and understanding. Michael and I would part ways, freeing each other from the bonds that had turned from comfort to chains. Richard stood by me through the transition, his presence a balm to the wounds of my heart. As I embarked on this new chapter, it was clear that the love I had found with him was not just a fleeting escape from an unhappy marriage, but a deep, transformative connection that promised a future filled with possibility. And so, my confession ends not with a plea for absolution, but with a question to you, my unseen confidant. In the labyrinth of love and loss, when the paths of desire and duty diverge, which path would you dare to walk? Share your thoughts, engage with this tale of human frailty, and perhaps, find a reflection of your own truths in the echoes of my story.